chilling family drama where my stepbrother threatened self-harm to control me, hiding dark surrogacy secrets and the hidden twin. At my father's funeral, I exposed decades of betrayal, public scandal, and criminal crimes. From nightmares and panic attacks to travel and self-discovery, this is a raw journey of survival, trust, and empowerment. I'll never forget the moment John leaned close to me in the church hallway, his breath hot with the smell of stale coffee and something sour, and whispered, "If you set boundaries with me, I'll end it, and it'll be your fault." The organ was still playing inside, people murmuring prayers, but my world stopped in that instant. My stepbrother, my equal in age, my so-called brother, was holding me hostage with the threat of his own life. It's crazy how fast things can collapse. Just 2 weeks earlier, I thought we were just another blended family trying to get through awkward gatherings, handing out homemade cookies at church socials, pretending we belonged. I had no idea that behind the hymns and fake smiles there were secrets that would break me in half. John and I both turned 18 that spring. We weren't close as kids, but our parents pushed the family narrative so hard that I tried. Carter and my dad had remarried when I was 10, and John came as part of the package deal. For years, he was the golden boy in church. Choir solos, spotless hair, charming smiles. I was the quieter one, always picking up the pieces when John got himself in trouble. At first, I thought his manipulations were just teenage drama. But the day he pressed that threat into me, I realized this wasn't some high school squabble. He was using fear to chain me, and I let him, because how do you gamble with someone's life? I could still taste the cookies my stepmom handed out that day, too sweet, overbaked, the chocolate chips melted into hard lumps. Everyone smiled, said delicious, and moved on, while I stood there with the taste of ash in my mouth. First real crack in the facade happened at school pickup time. It was late October, chilly and wet, and the minivan reeked of wet dog smell. John sat in the back with me, tapping his knee like a metronome. Out of nowhere, he leaned in and said, "Frank, you ever wonder why Dad keeps that spare house key in the toolbox? It's not for us, it's for someone else." I laughed it off, thought it was one of his stupid mind games. But then I noticed how serious his face was, how his eyes flicked toward Carter when Dad wasn't looking. Something inside me shifted, like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. Money was always tight, though Carter didn't like to admit it. One evening I overheard him on the phone, pacing in the kitchen, muttering about a $47 credit card debt. His voice shook in a way that scared me that I'd never heard my dad sound weak. John just smirked when I asked him about it later, like he already knew more than he was letting on. The smirk became a weapon. He'd drop hints about what Dad really did, or who the baby was, or how one day it'll all come up. I couldn't sleep. Every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the spare house key heavy in my drawer, my chest tight with dread. At the church gathering where it all came to a head, Carter pulled me aside. His hand was firm on my shoulder, but as I started nervously, "Frank, your stepbrother, he's not well. Don't provoke him, just keep the peace." I wanted to scream. Keep the peace? He's threatening me, Dad. But I swallowed it, because Carter's voice sounded like stone cracking under pressure. Inside, people mingled, their laughter bouncing off the church walls. I stood in the corner, clutching a paper plate of cookies, my stomach roiling. That's when John whispered his threat. "If you try to set boundaries, if you even try, I'll myself. And everyone will blame you." My body froze. My hands went numb. I dropped the plate, cookies scattering across the floor. The few church ladies gasped, but John just bent down, picked one up, and popped it in his mouth like nothing happened. And that was the first red flag I could no longer ignore. This wasn't just manipulation. It was control. And he had no intention of letting go. Looking back, the weeks after that church gathering blurred together in my mind like a fever dream. I kept telling myself John was just struggling, that if I stayed quiet and compliant, he'd stop threatening self-harm. But silence only made him bolder. One evening, around 7:30 p.m., I came home from school pickup duty with Carter. The sky was bruised purple, the air damp with that lingering wet dog smell from the minivan. I walked inside, and there was John, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, the spare house key dangling from a chain around his neck. He smiled at me all teeth. "You think this belongs to you, Frankie," he said, swinging it like a pendulum. My throat went dry. "Dad said it's for emergencies." John's smile widened. "No, Dad lies. It's not for us, it's for her." That was the first time he said her. He wouldn't tell me who. He just laughed when I pressed, then muttered, "You'll see." During my college years, I say that like they were normal, they weren't. I barely made it through my freshman semester because of him. Panic attacks started hitting me during lectures. I'd see someone fiddling with their keys and suddenly feel dizzy, like I was back in that living room with John whispering poison in my ear. I stopped going to parties. My friends thought I was antisocial. Even professors noticed my hand shaking when I tried to give presentations. Therapy became the only thing tethering me to reality, but even then, I'd sit across from my therapist and choke on words I couldn't say. How do you explain that your stepbrother controls your every move by threatening to himself if you set boundaries? Red flags piled up. One Friday night, while Dad worked late, John cornered me in the kitchen. The house smelled faintly of overcooked pasta and mildew. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You know what would happen if you left, right?" His tone was calm, almost conversational. I swallowed. "What?" "They'd all blame you, Dad, the church. Everyone. You're the quiet one, the weak one, easy target." I hated that part of me, believed him. The only person who didn't buy his act was my best friend, Lucas. We'd been close since middle school, the kind of friendship where you could just sit in silence and not feel awkward. Lucas noticed the bags under my eyes, the way I flinched at sudden noises. One night, we were sitting in his beat-up Honda Civic outside a Taco Bell parking lot, wrappers scattered on the dashboard. He said, "Frank, you gotta tell me what's going on. You look like you're dying inside." I broke then. Told him everything. The threats, The key. The whispers about her. Lucas just stared at me for a long time, then nodded. Okay, we're getting you out of this. He doesn't get to own you. That was the first moment I felt a flicker of hope. But John always had a way of yanking me back under. A youth group meeting one Wednesday, everyone was passing around homemade cookies, laughing, singing. John leaned over during the closing prayer and whispered, "If you tell anyone about me, I'll slit my wrists on the church steps while you're watching." I froze, my body locked in prayer position while tears threatened to spill. Around me, people were humming softly, eyes closed, completely unaware that I was suffocating. Afterward, I couldn't bring myself to eat. Every cookie looked like poison. Carter tried to intervene once. It was late November, cold enough that the windows frosted over. He sat me down in the den, his face tight, older than his 54 years. "Frank," he said, rubbing his temples, "I know John can be intense, but he's family. We have to protect him." I stared at him, waiting for the words that never came, "We'll protect you too." Instead, he sighed. "Don't provoke him, son. Just keep things calm." That broke me. My own father saw me drowning and handed me an anchor. The first time I realized just how dangerous John was came 2 days before Christmas. We were decorating the tree. Lights tangled, ornaments scattered across the floor. John picked up a glass ornament, turned it in his hand, and said softly, "You know, it wouldn't take much. Just one cut." He dragged his finger along the glass. Then he smiled at me, like we were sharing some private joke. My chest seized. My hand shook so badly I dropped the ornament I was holding. It shattered on the hardwood, the crash echoing through the house. Everyone came running, but no one saw what really broke in that moment, my ability to feel safe in my own home. That was when suspicion stopped being suspicion. Something darker was hiding beneath this threat, something I didn't yet understand. And soon, I'd find out what hurt really meant. It was February 14th when I discovered the truth. I remember the exact date because I was alone in the house, staring at the spare house key in my palm, thinking about how many lies it had unlocked. John wasn't home, and for the first time in months, the house felt silent, not peaceful, just empty and heavy. I'd been digging through old files in Carter's office, trying to make sense of the vague hints John had dropped. There were stacks of documents, bills, and legal papers, and buried beneath them, I found something I never expected, a folder labeled Surrogacy Confidential. My hand shook as I opened it, the paper crackling like brittle bones. Inside were contracts, doctor's notes, and hospital records. And then a name hit me like a punch to the gut, mine. I had a hidden twin. A twin my father and stepmother had kept secret my entire life. The papers confirmed it. They'd been born 2 minutes apart, but one of us had been placed in a private surrogacy arrangement, a secret deal that was supposed to be buried forever. My mind spun. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. The PTSD nightmare started immediately after. I would wake up drenched in sweat, screaming, the taste of copper on my tongue. Shadows in my room looked like John's face. Every sound of the mail carrier dropping packages at the gate, footsteps on the porch, the creak of a floorboard sent me into panic attacks. Therapy sessions became mandatory for survival. My therapist, Dr. Reynolds, said it was classic trauma rewiring. My brain had learned to associate safety with fear. He's manipulated your perception of reality for years. She told me in our first session, her voice calm but firm. Your anxiety, your nightmares, they are not weakness, they are proof you survived psychological entrapment. The betrayal went deeper. While trying to contact a family lawyer to understand the surrogacy paperwork, I discovered that the lawyer, someone I had trusted, had been sharing confidential information with John. Every strategy, every document, every concern I voiced it was being weaponized against me. I felt my trust fracture like glass shards embedding themselves in my chest. Lucas was the only constant. He helped me piece together a plan, secretly documenting evidence, taking photos, and keeping a journal. Without him, I would have been completely alone. But even with Lucas, the revelation of my twin tore at my identity. Who was I? Who was my twin? Why had my family hidden this? The social fallout was immediate. When some neighbours discovered John's manipulations, whispers followed me everywhere. People in church avoided my gaze, like I had been contaminated by the scandal. The mail carrier began leaving packages at the gate instead of at the door, muttering apologies, clearly trying to avoid me. Even strangers at the grocery store stayed a little too long, as if sensing my family's dark history. My reputation, fragile to begin with, shattered completely. Rumours about John's threats, the secret twin, and the surrogacy arrangement spread faster than wildfire. I became a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of a family scandal too grotesque to ignore. Then came the legal chaos. The discovery of my hidden twin triggered custody disputes over years of deception. Carter, despite his public image as a stable father, was forced to testify. Documents I never imagined seeing, financial transfers, off-the-books medical bills, and secret surrogacy contracts were made public. The courtroom became a theatre of humiliation, the media lurking in the hallways like vultures. Psychologically, I was unravelling. Sleep became a distant memory. Panic attacks plagued every waking moment. Trust was gone, I couldn't even leave my room without thinking someone was watching. Therapy sessions multiplied. Dr. Reynolds prescribed grounding exercises, meditation, and slow exposure therapy. Every session peeled back layers of my trauma, but it also made the truth feel heavier. And the betrayal didn't end there. I discovered John had an even darker secret, a crime spanning decades. Fraud, embezzlement, and even blackmail all quietly buried behind his charming facade. Police files, court documents, and witness statements confirmed it. My stepbrother wasn't just controlling, he was a predator, a master manipulator who had been hiding in plain sight. Even my closest allies were affected. Carter's lawyer had to be replaced, the church council convened emergency meetings, and Lucas had to intervene multiple times to prevent me from confronting John before I was ready. Everyone's lives were entangled in this web of lies, and I was at the centre, the eye of a storm I never asked to be in. The weight of all these revelations pressed down on me like concrete. Every breath was laborious. I wondered if I could survive this. Every night I drifted into nightmares where John whispered, "You'll never escape me," and my twin's face appeared, blank, unknown, accusing. By the time I faced my first real public confrontation, I was a mix of fear, rage, and desperation. But deep inside, a spark lingered, a spark that would grow into the strength I needed to survive what came next. The day of my father's funeral, May 12th, 2023, was the kind of grey spring morning that seeps into your bones. The church smelled faintly of lilies and old pew polish, mixed with the lingering scent of wet dog from John's jacket. People whispered condolences, but their eyes flicked to me as if searching for signs of weakness. I could feel the tension coiling in my chest like a snake. I carried the spare house key in my pocket, a talisman and a reminder of everything John had manipulated me with. I'd rehearsed what I had to say over and over, the word the lifeline in a sea of chaos. Lucas was beside me, silent but supportive, like he always had been. The service was in full swing when I finally saw him, John, leaning casually against the front pew, the picture of innocence in his black suit. He caught my eye and smirked, the kind of smirk that made my blood boil. He had no idea what was coming. I stood, clearing my throat. The murmurs hushed as I walked up to the podium. "There's something I need to say," I began, my voice trembling. Every eye in the church turned toward me. I felt my panic spike, my heart hammering. But I forced myself to breathe. This isn't just about Dad, it's about what's been hidden from all of us for years. I revealed everything. John's threats, the manipulations, the secret twin, the surrogacy nightmare. I laid out the documents, the hospital records, the lawyer's betrayal, and even the police files detailing John's crimes. I spoke fast, almost too fast, the words tumbling out like a dam breaking. "John," I said, locking eyes with him. "You looked me in the eyes and lied while I was at my lowest. You threatened me, you controlled me, and you hid the truth about my own family, and you thought I'd never find out." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The organist faltered, the choir stopped singing mid-note. People whispered, tears streamed, and a few guests even walked out in shock. John's face fell, but his hands were shaking not with fear, but with rage. "Frank," he started, voice sharp, but I cut him off. "No, John, you don't get to speak, not today, not ever again." Parter's sister, Aunt Lorraine, stood up in the back. "I can't believe this, all these years? How could you?" Her voice cracked, accusing both John and Carter. The room erupted. Family members yelled, whispers collided with sobs, and strangers in the pews gawked, some taking out phones. Lucas squeezed my shoulder. "You were doing the right thing," he whispered. Then came the twist I wasn't fully prepared for. One of John's old accomplices, a former business associate, stepped forward, handing me a sealed envelope. "You need to see this," he said. Inside were documents proving that John's criminal activities went far beyond what I'd discovered. He had been running illegal operations for decades, quietly covering his tracks. Fraud, blackmail, even identity theft. Police were now involved, and this envelope contained evidence that would put him behind bars. John's face turned pale, his smirk gone. He glanced around, desperate, like a cornered animal. But the damage was done. The church was in chaos. Some guests clutched their pearls, others whispered, "I can't believe this family." Even the pastor, usually stoic, looked shaken. After I finished, I stepped down, heart pounding, tears blurring my vision. People avoided looking at me, or they stared too long. The mail carrier who had been leaving packages at the gate, one of the only neutral outsiders, stopped and whispered, "I didn't know." That whisper echoed everything I had felt: disbelief, betrayal, and the suffocating weight of public shame. John tried to approach me afterward. "Frank, we can fix this. You don't understand it." I pulled back, anger and fear colliding. "I understand more than you'll ever know. Stay away." That night, after the funeral, the reality hit. Police interviews, lawyers, media calls, they all came flooding in. My life was out in the open, and the world had seen everything. Even my closest friends, like Lucas, were shaken by the intensity of what had been revealed. But I also felt strange clarity. For the first time, I had taken control, faced the abuser, and exposed the truth. Even though the scandal made me the talk of the neighbourhood and caused social isolation, friends kept their distance, and the church community whispered. I felt the small, fierce spark inside me. I had confronted the darkest part of my family, and I had survived. It was devastating. It was messy. It was humiliating. And yet, for the first time, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The days after the funeral were the hardest of my life. The church scandal spread like wildfire. People whispered in the grocery store, the school parking lot, even at my college campus. Rumours about John's threats, the hidden twin, and the surrogacy nightmare made me feel like a walking headline. The mail carrier started leaving packages at the gate instead of the door, muttering apologies, clearly uncomfortable. Even my professors avoided eye contact, unsure how to handle the controversy surrounding me. Inside, I was unravelling. Panic attacks hit multiple times a day, triggered by the slightest noise. The sound of keys jingling, the smell of wet dog, even someone humming hymn everyday things became minefields. Nightmares came relentlessly. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, seeing John's face over and over, whispering his threats, while my hidden twin's eyes stared blankly at me, accusing. Therapy became a lifeline. Dr. Reynolds scheduled multiple sessions per week, and I started EMDR and cognitive behavioural therapy to deal with the trauma. I learned grounding techniques, focusing on textures, tastes, and smells to anchor myself. The overbaked cookies John once used to lure me into his games became a strange comfort. I'd bite them slowly, letting the sweet, burnt taste remind me I was still in control. I also began keeping a journal, detailing every intrusive thought, every panic attack, every moment of betrayal. Writing helped me externalize the chaos in my mind, but it also reminded me just how deep John's manipulation went. Even Carter, my father, who had seemed so protective, had participated in hiding the truth. I didn't just feel betrayal, I felt abandoned. Socially, I was a pariah. Invitations stopped. Friends whispered behind my back. Some neighbours refused to speak to me, while others stared with curiosity and suspicion. Lucas was the only constant. He'd drive me to therapy, sit through tense meetings with lawyers, and spend hours helping me organise evidence. Without him, I'm not sure I would have survived the psychological onslaught. Financial stress compounded the emotional turmoil. With the $2847 credit card debt my father had hidden, plus legal fees, I felt trapped in every possible way. I couldn't focus on school, sleep, or even eat properly. Grocery shopping became a nightmare. Every cash register beep reminded me of John's manipulation. Every clerk's glance felt judgmental. Trust, once fractured, was completely gone. I couldn't leave my room without anticipating danger. Every shadow in the hallway could be John's, every phone call a threat. Therapy helped me process these feelings, but my thinking had been rewired. I second-guessed every decision, every relationship. I was hyper-aware, cautious, and perpetually on edge. Even family connections fell apart. Aunt Lorraine refused to speak to Carter for months. The church leadership avoided our family entirely. My classmates whispered behind closed doors, friends I thought I could count on disappeared, and strangers in public places stared, sometimes with pity, sometimes with judgment. I felt isolated in a way I had never experienced before. The legal battle intensified. John's criminal history and manipulations were now public, and police investigations began. Family lawyer who had betrayed me was disbarred, but the damage was done. Every confidential conversation, every trust I placed in others had been weaponized. I remember one night, sitting on my bedroom floor, surrounded by stacks of legal papers and journals, sobbing uncontrollably. Lucas sat beside me, silent, letting me cry. "You'll get through this," he whispered, though I didn't believe him. I felt completely powerless, like the trauma had consumed every part of me. Depression set in hard. I stopped attending classes regularly, barely ate, and slept only when exhaustion took over. Therapy sessions became lifelines, but there were moments I questioned whether life was worth surviving. Every day felt like wading through quicksand, every breath heavy, every thought poisoned by fear and betrayal. I lost everything: trust, security, family reputation, even my own sense of identity. The hidden twin, the surrogacy secrets, John's threats, Carter's silence, the lawyer's betrayal, it all pressed down on me. I felt trapped inside a house that had once been my sanctuary but had become a cage. And yet, even at my lowest, a tiny amber remained. The spark of survival. Lucas never left my side. Therapy, though grueling, kept me tethered to reality. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to see a faint path forward. I knew that if I could survive John's control, his lies, and the public scandal, I could survive anything. It wouldn't be immediate. It wouldn't be easy. But even in the darkness of my panic attacks, nightmares, and public shame, I realized something. I wasn't broken beyond repair. I could reclaim my life. The first morning I woke up without a nightmare, it was raining lightly. Drops pattered against my window like soft applause. It was almost 6:45 a.m, school pickup time for my old routine, but I didn't have to rush anywhere. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel like it was being crushed. It was a small victory, but a real one. Therapy had become my anchor. Dr. Reynolds guided me through trauma-focused MDR, helping me rewrite the way my brain processed memories. Your survival instincts have been hijacked, she told me one session. But they're also what kept you alive. Slowly, I learned to separate John's voice from my own, to recognize that his threats weren't my responsibility. Lucas stayed by my side through every setback. He'd show up with homemade cookies burnt just enough to remind me of the old days, but still soft in the center. We'd sit on his porch, the wet dog smell from his golden retriever drifting around us, and he'd just listen. No pity. No judgment. Just presence. I also started reclaiming my space. The spare house key that had once symbolized John's control became mine again. I took it off the chain, held it in my palm, and decided to move out of the house entirely. Lucas helped me pack what little I had left. Leaving was terrifying. I'd lived under manipulation for so long that freedom felt like a cliff, was stepping over that threshold was the first real act of defiance. With legal help, this time from a trustworthy attorney recommended by Dr. Reynolds, I filed restraining orders and cut all ties with John. Police investigations into his crimes continued, and though the process was slow, it brought me closure to know that the system was finally holding him accountable. During this time, I also sought out my hidden twin. The first meeting was awkward and painful, like staring into a mirror that showed everything I'd lost. They had their own trauma from being kept a secret, their own story of betrayal and abandonment. But we bonded over our shared history, slowly building a relationship on truth instead of lies. Meeting them helped me reclaim parts of myself I thought John had erased. Socially, things were still complicated. Some people never apologized for their whispers. The mail carrier still left packages at the gate, though now with a tentative smile. But I stopped needing external validation. My therapy, my twin, and Lucas's loyalty gave me a foundation stronger than public approval. Financially, I dug myself out of the hole. I worked part-time jobs, saved every dollar, and paid off the remaining $2847 of my father's debt. Every payment felt like cutting another thread that tied me to the past. I learned to budget, to build my own credit, and to stand on my own feet. The nightmares didn't vanish overnight, but they changed. Instead of waking up feeling trapped, I began waking up angry at what had been done to me, but also motivated. I started running every morning, pushing my body to feel strong again. Therapy gave me tools, but exercise gave me power. My panic attacks decreased. My trust issues softened. My thinking wired itself, this time in my favor. 2 years after my father's funeral, I stood in an airport with a single backpack. My passport trembled in my hand. I had saved enough to travel the world, to see places I'd only dreamed of when I was stuck under John's thumb. The idea of stepping into a plane terrified me, but it also thrilled me. This was my rebirth. I started in Portugal, where the ocean smelled like salt and freedom. Then Japan, where I sat quietly in shrines, breathing incense in silence. In each country, I left a little piece of my trauma behind. I took photos, journaled, and wrote letters to my twin. I discovered my inner strength on the road, not in one dramatic epiphany, but in 1,000 small choices, saying no, choosing peace, trusting again. I built friendships, met people who had survived their own nightmares, and realized how small my world had been under John's control. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Even now, when I taste burnt cookies or smell wet dog, memories surface. But they don't crush me. They remind me how far I've come. Today, at 24, I live on my own terms. I've rebuilt my credit, built a career, and stayed close with Lucas and my twin. I still go to therapy not because I'm broken, but because I value the progress I've made. My past isn't a secret anymore. My story is mine, and no one can weaponize it against me again. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a situation like mine, know this, it's not your fault. You can survive. You can rebuild. You can travel the world and find your inner strength. Because I did. And I'm still